A Secret Service file marked classified mentions Bruce Lee. Here's why. May 15th, 1972. Secure facility, Los Angeles. Bruce Lee invited to demonstrate techniques for presidential protection detail. 5 Secret Service agents attending. Senior Agent James Caldwell, Marine veteran, 15 years protecting presidents, hand-to-hand combat instructor, was skeptical. We're trained by the best in the world. Marine Corps. FBI. Secret Service tactical experts. What can you possibly show us that we don't already know? Bruce's response. Let me demonstrate one thing. If you can defend against it, I'll agree your training is sufficient. Caldwell took his defensive stance. The stance that had protected presidents in war zones. The stance refined through decades of real threats. He was confident, ready, certain. 3 strikes. 5 seconds. Caldwell couldn't defend a single one. The classified memo documenting what happened next changed Secret Service training forever. This is that demonstration. That file. That 5 seconds that proved elite training had critical gaps. National Archives, College Park, Maryland. October 2024. Sarah Martinez sat at her desk, surrounded by cardboard boxes. Freedom of Information Act requests. Thousands of them. Her job as declassification officer was to review government documents requested by the public and determine what could be released, what needed redaction, what remained too sensitive for disclosure. Most requests were routine. Historical documents about policies, programs, events from decades past. Usually nothing dramatic. Just bureaucratic records of government operations. But sometimes, rarely, Sarah found something interesting. This particular FOIA request came from martial arts historian named Dr. Michael Chun. He was researching Bruce Lee's work with law enforcement and military personnel in the early 1970s, looking for any documentation of training programs, consultations, demonstrations. Dr. Chin's request specifically mentioned Secret Service, FBI, and Department of Defense. Most agencies had responded with no records found. But Secret Service had responded differently. Records exist, but required declassification review before release. Sarah had been assigned the review. She'd requested the files 3 weeks ago. They'd arrived yesterday. 5 boxes, mostly training manuals from the 1970s. Protective Services protocols. Defensive tactics curricula. Nothing mentioning Bruce Lee in any of the first 4 boxes. Standard documentation. Nothing requiring continued classification. Sarah was preparing to approve release of everything when she opened the 5th box. Inside was thin folder. Manila folder with red stripe across the top indicating classified status. Label read. Protective Services Training, Supplemental Methods 1972. Sarah opened it carefully. Most documents were routine. Training schedules. Instructor certifications. Evaluation reports for various hand-to-hand combat programs tested by Secret Service in early 70s. Then Sarah saw it. Single-page memo dated May 15th, 1972. Subject line, Consultation with Bruce Lee, Evaluation of Martial Arts Applications for Presidential Protection Detail. Sarah read it carefully. The memo described private demonstration conducted at secure facility in Los Angeles during President Nixon's California visit. Bruce Lee, identified as martial arts instructor and consultant, had been invited to demonstrate techniques that might supplement Secret Service hand-to-hand combat training. 5 agents attended, including Senior Agent James Caldwell, who was lead hand-to-hand combat instructor for the service. The memo continued. Consultant Lee demonstrated 3 techniques in rapid succession against Agent Caldwell, who was unable to successfully defend any of the 3 strikes using current Secret Service protocols. Demonstration revealed significant gaps in current defensive capabilities, particularly regarding low-line attacks, redirected force, and unconventional striking angles. Agent Caldwell and attending agents unanimously recommend implementation of supplemental training based on techniques demonstrated. Request authorization for Agent Caldwell to continue studies with Consultant Lee to develop integrated training curriculum. Sarah sat back. Bruce Lee had demonstrated techniques, to Secret Service agents that they couldn't defend against, had exposed gaps in presidential protection training, had apparently impressed them enough that they wanted him to train their instructors. This was significant. This was exactly what Dr. Chen was looking for. This was also classified. Sarah checked the classification markings. Classified, protective methods, and defensive vulnerabilities not for public disclosure. That made sense. You didn't want potential assassins knowing gaps in Secret Service defensive training. But this was from 1972, 52 years ago. The specific techniques described would be obsolete by now. Secret Service had certainly updated their training dozens of times since then. The protective methods from 1972 were historical curiosities, not current vulnerabilities. Sarah cross-referenced other documents in the box. Found follow-up memos from summer 1972. Found training curriculum from late 1972 and early 1973 that referenced supplemental techniques and Lee protocols. Found evaluation reports praising the new training. Found memo from January 1974 noting that Agent Caldwell had continued martial arts training even after consultant Lee's untimely death in July 1973. The documentation confirmed that Bruce Lee had consulted with Secret Service, had trained at least one of their instructors, and had influenced their hand-to-hand combat protocols. Sarah made her decision. The file was old enough that declassification was appropriate. The protective methods described were outdated. Public interest in Bruce Lee's law enforcement work was legitimate historical inquiry. She'd approved declassification with minor redactions, specific facility locations, names of agents other than Caldwell, who was referenced in multiple documents, technical details of current protective methods. But the core information that Bruce Lee had demonstrated techniques to Secret Service, that he'd exposed gaps in their training, that they'd incorporated as methods that could be released. Sarah prepared the declassification memo. Then she did something unusual. She decided to track down James Caldwell, the Secret Service agent who'd been at the demonstration, who'd been unable to defend Bruce's techniques, who'd gone on to study with Bruce, who might be willing to talk about it now that the file was being declassified. Sarah searched federal personnel records, found James Caldwell, born 1934, joined Secret Service 1957, retired 1994 after 37 years of service. Decorations for protective service. Commendations for training development. Still alive according to Social Security records. Living in Virginia. Sarah made phone call she wasn't required to make. Found Caldwell's number through directory assistance. Called. A woman answered, Caldwell's wife. Sarah explained who she was, why she was calling. The woman said she'd get Jim. Elderly voice came on the line. This is Jim Caldwell. Mr. Caldwell, my name is Sarah Martinez. I'm a declassification officer with National Archives. I'm processing a Freedom of Information Act request for Secret Service files related to Bruce Lee. I found a memo from May 1972 describing a demonstration you attended. I'm calling to inform you that I'm declassifying the file. I wanted to give you advance notice in case you had any concerns. Silence on the line. Then, 52 years. I've been waiting 52 years for someone to ask about that day. I'm 90 years old, Ms. Martinez. I've kept that demonstration private because it was classified, but I wanted to tell the story. Wanted people to know what Bruce Lee did for Secret Service training, what he taught us. May I ask, who requested the file? Martial arts historian named Dr. Michael Chun. He's researching Bruce Lee's law enforcement training work. Give me his contact information. I want to talk to him. I want to tell him what really happened that day. The memo only captures the facts, doesn't capture what it felt like, what it meant. I've got details that aren't in any file. I've got 52 years of perspective on why those 5 seconds changed everything. If this is finally being declassified, I want the full story told. The story of how Bruce Lee showed the best trained protection agents in a world that we didn't know how to fight. Sarah gave him Dr. Chen's information. Caldwell thanked her, said he'd call the historian immediately, said he'd been carrying this story for over 5 decades and was grateful to finally share it. Sarah hung up and smiled. This wasn't just declassified file. This was living history. This was witness who'd been there, who remembered, who was ready to talk. Dr. Chan was about to get much more than documents. He was about to get testimony from the man who'd stood across from Bruce Lee and learned in 5 seconds that everything he thought he knew was incomplete. May 15th, 1972. Los Angeles. The facility was unmarked building in industrial area near LAX. Government-owned. Used for classified training, demonstrations, meetings that required security and privacy. No signs outside. No indication of what happened within. Just anonymous building that could have been warehouse or storage facility. Inside was different. Training space. Matted floor. Mirrors on walls. Equipment for physical training. Conference room for briefings. Everything needed for tactical preparation. James Caldwell arrived at 1:45 p.m. 15 minutes early. Always early. Marine Corps had trained that into him decades ago. He was 38 years old. 6'1", 195 pounds. Fit. Disciplined. 15 years with Secret Service after 6 years in Marines, including 2 tours in Vietnam. He'd protected President Johnson, now protecting President Nixon. Had been on protection details in war zones, in hostile countries, in crowds of thousands. Had trained hundreds of new Secret Service agents in defensive tactics. Was widely considered one of the best hand-to-hand combat instructors in the service. Today he was here reluctantly. Ed Parker, martial artist who'd taught Elvis Presley and had connections throughout law enforcement, had convinced Secret Service contact that Bruce Lee should demonstrate techniques for presidential protection scenarios. Caldwell had been ordered to attend, to evaluate, to determine if this martial arts instructor had anything valuable to offer elite protection agents. Caldwell was skeptical, deeply skeptical. He'd seen martial arts demonstrations before. Flashy, choreographed, impressive to watch, but impractical for real combat. Secret Service agents didn't need to do spinning kicks or breakboards. They needed to protect the president from genuine threats using techniques that worked under pressure in real conditions. Caldwell had been trained by Marine Corps close combat specialists, by Secret Service tactical experts, by FBI defensive tactics instructors. His training was proven, battle-tested, refined through decades of real protection work. What could Chinese martial arts actor possibly teach him? 4 other Secret Service agents arrived. Michael Torres, 35, had trained under Caldwell, was more open-minded, curious about what they might learn. 3 others were neutral, willing to see what happened, not expecting much, but professional enough to give it fair evaluation. At 2 p.m. exactly, Ed Parker arrived with Bruce Lee. Parker was large man, 6 feet tall, 200 pounds, imposing presence. He greeted the agents warmly, introduced Bruce. "Gentlemen, this is Bruce Lee. I've told you about his work. I believe he has techniques that could enhance your close-quarters protection capabilities. I appreciate your willingness to evaluate what he has to offer." Bruce was smaller than Caldwell expected, maybe 5'7". Thin. Caldwell estimated 135, 140 pounds maximum. Bruce was wearing casual clothes, slacks, polo shirt, canvas shoes. Carried gym bag. Looked like college student, not martial arts master. Looked like someone Caldwell could physically dominate without effort. Bruce shook hands with each agent. Polite, respectful, no arrogance, no bravado, just calm confidence. He spoke clearly. "Gentlemen, thank you for your time. I understand you have the best protection training in the world. I'm not here to replace that or to suggest it's insufficient. I'm here to offer supplemental techniques for specific scenarios that might not be covered in your current protocols." Caldwell responded professionally, but his skepticism was evident. "Mr. Lee, we're trained for every scenario we anticipate in presidential protection. Threats from crowds, vehicle assaults, building security, close quarters protection, multiple attackers, armed assailants. What scenarios do you think we're missing?" Bruce's answer was measured, thoughtful. Trained martial artists. Multiple simultaneous attackers with hand-to-hand skills specifically designed to bypass conventional defensive responses. Your training is excellent for anticipated threats, shooters, untrained attackers, crowd situations. but it's built on assumptions about how attackers will move, how they'll strike, what techniques they'll use. I'm here to show you what happens when someone attacks using techniques your training didn't anticipate. Not because your trainers were incompetent, but because they couldn't prepare you for every possible approach. I've studied many fighting systems. I've identified gaps that exist in most institutional training programs. I like to show you those gaps so you can address them. Caldwell's internal response. Trained martial artists aren't trying to assassinate presidents. This is theoretical exercise with no practical application. But fine, let's see what he's got. Let's prove Secret Service training is already comprehensive. Caldwell said aloud, "All right, Mr. Lee, show us what you think we're missing." Bruce set down his gym bag, stepped to center of the mat. "I'd like to propose simple test. I'll demonstrate one sequence of techniques. 3 strikes. If you can defend them using your current training, then I'll agree your protocols are comprehensive. But if I can demonstrate gaps, vulnerabilities that your training hasn't addressed, would you be willing to consider that supplemental techniques might be valuable?" Caldwell agreed immediately, confidently. "Absolutely. I'll defend. You attack. Let's see if Secret Service training is sufficient." Torres and the other agents moved to the edge of the mat, watching, curious. Caldwell was their best defensive tactics instructor. If anyone could defend against whatever Bruce tried, Caldwell could. Bruce gave instructions. Take your standard defensive stance. The position you'd use when protecting the president if you anticipated immediate threat but couldn't yet identify its source. Caldwell demonstrated. This was stance drilled into every Secret Service agent. Feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent, weight balanced and centered, ready to move in any direction. Hands positioned at chest level, ready to draw a weapon from shoulder holster or to intercept physical threat. Body angled slightly to protect principal who would be behind him. Eyes scanning, looking for threats from multiple angles. This stance had been refined through decades of protection work, had saved presidents' lives, was foundation of Secret Service defensive tactics. Bruce studied Caldwell's position, walked around him, observed from different angles. Caldwell could feel Bruce analyzing, looking for weaknesses, looking for openings. Caldwell felt confident. His stance was solid. His balance was perfect. His guards were up. Whatever Bruce tried, Caldwell was ready. Bruce stepped back, created distance of about 6 feet. Standard engagement distance for close protection scenarios. Close enough that threat was immediate. Far enough that agent had fractional second to react. "I'm going to attack you 3 times. 3 different strikes. You defend using your training. If you successfully defend all 3, you prove your point. Your training is comprehensive. If you can't defend them, we discuss why and what could supplement your protocols. Are you ready?" Caldwell nodded. Set his stance. Focused. 15 years of training. Hundreds of hours of defensive tactics practice. Countless scenarios rehearsed. He was ready. "Go ahead." Bruce asked. "I won't announce when I'm starting. React to what you see, as you would to real threat." Caldwell understood. Real threats don't announce themselves. You react to movement, to aggression, to attack. Caldwell's training covered this. His reflexes were honed. His reaction time was excellent. Whatever Bruce tried, Caldwell would see it and respond appropriately. The room went silent. 5 agents watching. Bruce and Caldwell facing each other. 6 feet apart. Caldwell in protective stance. Bruce relaxed but focused. No one moved for 3 seconds. 5 seconds. Caldwell's eyes were locked on Bruce's center mass. Standard training. Watching the center allows peripheral vision to track hands and feet, prevents being fooled by feints. Then Bruce moved. But not the way Caldwell expected. Not the way anyone in Caldwell's training had ever moved. Bruce's right leg swept low. Fast, targeting Caldwell's lead leg. Shin to shin. Below the knee. A kick Caldwell had never trained to defend because Secret Service protocols focused on protecting the principal and defending against torso and head-level threats. Attackers in crowds didn't throw low kicks. They tried to shoot, to grab, to strike at the president. Low kicks weren't part of the threat profile Secret Service trained against. Caldwell's brain registered the attack too late. By the time his mind processed, he's kicking low, not punching high. The kick had already landed. Not full power. This was demonstration. Bruce had pulled it, but enough. Enough that Caldwell's lead leg buckled slightly. Enough that his weight shifted involuntarily. Enough that his perfect balance was compromised. Caldwell's thought, "What? I didn't even see that coming. Where did that?" No time to finish the thought. No time to reset. Bruce was already moving, closing distance while Caldwell's weight was shifting. While his balance was compromised, Caldwell's hands came up instinctively, trying to re-establish defensive position, trying to protect against the follow-up he knew was coming. Bruce's right hand shot forward. Straight punch toward Caldwell's solar plexus. Caldwell's training kicked in. Left hand moved to block, intercepting the strike exactly as he'd been trained. Good block. Strong. Fast. Textbook secret service défensif technique. Except Bruce didn't fight the block. Didn't try to power through it. The instant Caldwell's hand contacted Bruce's, Bruce redirected. Used Caldwell's own blocking force. When Caldwell pushed Bruce's right hand aside, Bruce yielded to the pressure, let his hand be redirected, but used that motion to move Caldwell's guard out of position. Caldwell felt it happening, felt his block being used against him, felt his own defensive motion creating the opening. His thought, "He's using my defense, he's turning my technique." Bruce's left hand was already moving, had clear path now, struck toward Caldwell's solar plexus, pulled it, didn't actually make contact, just touched lightly where full strike would have landed, demonstrating the opening, showing that real strike would have driven all air from Caldwell's lungs, would have doubled him over, would have left him helpless. 2 strikes, maybe 3 seconds elapsed. Caldwell hadn't successfully defended either one. First strike, he hadn't even seen coming. Second strike, he'd blocked correctly, but Bruce had used the block against him. Caldwell tried to reset, tried to reestablish his stance. His mind was racing. 2 strikes I couldn't stop. Need to focus. Need to adjust. Need to. Bruce's hand moved toward Caldwell's throat. Third strike. Coming fast. Caldwell's training screamed at him. Throat is vital target, highest priority defense, protected at all costs. His hands came up. Faster this time. Moving to intercept. To block. To protect his throat from the strike he could see coming. But Bruce was faster. His hand arrived before Caldwell's defense was set. Before Caldwell's hands reached protective position. Bruce's fingertips stopped 1 inch from Caldwell's throat. Perfect control. Perfect precision. Could have struck. Could have crushed Caldwell's windpipe. Could have ended the demonstration with simulated kill. Instead stopped with fingertips barely touching skin. Demonstrating the opening. Proving the point. Showing that third strike would have been fatal in real scenario. Caldwell stood frozen, staring at Bruce's hand next to his throat, feeling the light touch of fingertips where killing strike would have landed. 3 attacks, 3 failures to defend. 5 seconds total, maybe less. 15 years of training, hundreds of hours of defensive tactics instruction, real-world experience protecting presidents in hostile environments. And Caldwell hadn't stopped a single strike from martial arts instructor half his size. Bruce stepped back, lowered his hand, created distance. His face showed no triumph, no gloating, just calm, just focus. "Thank you, Agent Caldwell. You can relax now." Caldwell stood there, still in defensive stance, his brain trying to process what had just happened, trying to understand how he'd been so completely helpless, how every defensive response he'd been trained to use had failed, how Bruce had attacked from angles Caldwell hadn't anticipated, using techniques Caldwell's training hadn't covered, at speeds Caldwell couldn't match. Ed Parker was smiling. He'd known, had told Secret Service that Bruce would show them things they'd never seen, had predicted they'd be impressed, had predicted they'd want to learn. Parker's prediction was being vindicated in real time. Agent Torres stood with his mouth slightly open, stunned. Caldwell was the best hand-to-hand instructor in Secret Service. Torres had trained under him for 3 years, had watched Caldwell demonstrate defensive techniques hundreds of times, had seen Caldwell spar with other agents, with FBI instructors, with military combat trainers. Had never seen anyone do to Caldwell what Bruce had just done. Complete domination. Complete inability to defend. If Caldwell couldn't stop those strikes, none of them could. The other three agents were silent, processing, understanding that what they'd just witnessed had implications beyond this demonstration. Implications for presidential protection, for their training, for their entire approach to defensive tactics. Bruce had just exposed gaps, serious gaps, gaps that could get the president killed. Caldwell found his voice. What? How did you? I didn't even see the first strike coming. The second one, you used my block against me. The third, I tried to defend, and you were faster. I couldn't stop any of them. Bruce's response was respectful, not condescending. Teacher explaining to student who genuinely wanted to understand. Your training is excellent for the threats it's designed to counter, but it's built on specific assumptions about how attackers will move. First strike, the low kick to your leg. Your training focuses on protecting the principal and defending against torso and head-level attacks. That's appropriate for most scenarios. Assassins in crowds are trying to shoot the president or grab him. They're not throwing low kicks. But trained martial artist attacks low first. Disrupts your base. Compromises your balance. Makes you vulnerable to follow-up strikes. Your stance is strong against anticipated threats. Weak against that specific attack because you've never trained to defend it. Every word was true. Caldwell had been trained to protect President Nixon's head and torso, to intercept threats coming from crowd level. His stance was designed for that, optimized for that, but it left his legs undefended because his trainers had never anticipated needing to defend them. Bruce continued, second strike, you blocked it. Your blocking technique is good, strong, fast, exactly as you were trained. But your training teaches you to block committed strikes, to intercept and stop them. When I felt your block, I didn't fight it. I redirected it, used your force, turned your defensive motion into opening for my attack. Your technique works perfectly against opponents who commit to their strikes, who try to power through your defense. It's vulnerable to opponents who yield and redirect, who use your own force against you. That's different fighting philosophy. Your trainers taught you one approach, didn't teach you to counter the other. Caldwell nodded slowly. Everything Bruce said made sense. Explained exactly what had happened. Explained why Caldwell's technically perfect block had failed to protect him. And the third strike, Caldwell asked. Bruce answered, speed and compound vulnerability. By the third strike, I'd already disrupted your base with the first kick, already breached your guard with the second strike. You were reacting instead of anticipating. Your defense was late. I had the opening. In real scenario, that would be fatal strike. You'd be incapacitated, unable to protect the principal. That's the danger of gaps in training. Each gap compounds the next. First gap creates vulnerability. Second gap exploits it. Third gap finishes it. Your training is excellent, but these specific gaps exist, and they can be exploited. Silence in the room. Every agent absorbing the implications, understanding what Bruce was really saying. If someone with martial arts training attacked a Secret Service protection detail using these techniques, the agents wouldn't be able to stop them. The president would be vulnerable, not because Secret Service agents were poorly trained, but because their training had gaps. Caldwell's pride was struggling. 15 years of certainty. 15 years of being expert, of being instructor, of being the person other agents looked to for defensive tactics knowledge. All of it challenged in 5 seconds. All of it revealed as incomplete. But struggling against his pride was something stronger, duty, responsibility, the absolute requirement that he be prepared to protect the president against any threat, any scenario, any attack. If his training had gaps, if there were vulnerabilities that could be exploited, then his duty demanded he fix them, demanded he learn, demanded he set pride aside and become student again. Duty won. Duty always won for Caldwell. That's why he'd been Marine, why he'd been Secret Service agent for 15 years, why he'd volunteered for the hardest assignments and the most dangerous protection details. Duty mattered more than ego. Caldwell looked at Bruce. You're right. Our training prepared us for anticipated threats. You just showed us unanticipated ones. Someone with your knowledge attacking a protection detail. We're not prepared for that. We're prepared for untrained attackers, for gunmen, for crowd threats, but not for trained martial artist who knows how to exploit the gaps in our defensive stance. That's a vulnerability. That could get the president killed. I need you to teach me. Teach us. Show us how to close those gaps. Show us how to defend against what you just did. Because if you can do it, someone else can too. And we need to be ready. Bruce smiled, not triumphant, just satisfied. This was the outcome he'd hoped for. Not humiliation. Education. Not proving he was better. Proving there were things they didn't know. Things they needed to learn. That's exactly why I'm here, Agent Caldwell. Let's begin. The next hour and 45 minutes transformed Caldwell's understanding of combat. Bruce didn't just demonstrate techniques. He explained principles. Explained why Secret Service training had specific gaps and how those gaps could be closed. Explained different fighting philosophies, hard versus soft, committed versus yielding, linear versus circular. Explained how someone trained in one philosophy was vulnerable to someone using another. Bruce showed them how to defend against low kicks, how to adjust stance to protect legs without compromising ability to protect principle, how to check kicks, how to absorb them, how to counter them. He demonstrated slowly, let them practice, corrected their positioning, their timing, their technique. He showed them how to defend against redirected force, how to recognize when opponent was yielding instead of committing, how to adjust blocks to prevent being used against themselves, how to maintain structure even when force was redirected, how to counter-redirect. Again, slow demonstration, practice, correction, repetition until the movement became reflexive. He showed them compound attack sequences, how first strike created vulnerability that second strike exploited, how to defend in depth, how to reset between strikes instead of letting one failure cascade into total defeat, how to maintain defensive integrity even when off balance or surprised. Torres and the other agents participated fully, learning, practicing, testing the techniques against each other, finding that yes, these methods worked. Yes, they could defend against Bruce's attacks once they understood the principles. Yes, this supplemented their training without replacing it, added new dimensions without undermining existing skills. But Caldwell was transformed most profoundly. He'd been instructor for years, had stopped being student, had stopped questioning his knowledge, had stopped looking for gaps because he believed there weren't any. Bruce had shattered that certainty, had shown Caldwell that no matter how expert you become, there's always more to learn, always deeper understanding to pursue, always new perspectives to integrate. Caldwell asked questions constantly. Why does that work? How do I recognize that earlier? What if attacker does this instead? Bruce answered patiently, demonstrated variations, showed counters and counter-counters, revealed the depth of his knowledge. This wasn't collection of techniques. This was complete fighting system built on principles that could be applied infinitely. At 3:45, after nearly 2 hours of intensive training, Ed Parker called time. Gentlemen, I think we've covered substantial ground. Bruce has other commitments, but I believe you've seen enough to evaluate whether this training has value for Secret Service protocols. Caldwell spoke for the group. Mr. Parker, this has extraordinary value. Mr. Lee has shown us gaps we didn't know existed, has given us tools to close those gaps, has enhanced our defensive capabilities significantly. Speaking personally, I want to continue this training. I want to study with Mr. Lee extensively. I want to integrate these principles into Secret Service defensive tactics curriculum. I'll be submitting formal recommendation to our training division. I believe every agent should receive this supplemental instruction. I believe it could save the president's life. Torres and the other agents nodded agreement. What they'd witnessed and learned today was too valuable to be one-time demonstration. This needed to be systematized, integrated, made part of standard Secret Service training. Bruce thanked them. I'm honored to help. Presidential protection is critical work. If these techniques can enhance agent safety and presidential security, I'm happy to share them. Agent Caldwell, If your superiors approve, I'm willing to work with you to develop training curriculum, to teach you and other instructors so you can propagate these methods throughout the service. No fee. This is contribution to national security. Something I could do to serve the country that's given me opportunities. Caldwell shook Bruce's hand. Thank you. I'll push for approval. I'll make the case. Today changed my understanding of combat. Changed my approach to training. Changed what I thought was possible. That's a gift. I want to honor it by learning everything you're willing to teach. After Bruce and Ed Parker left, the 5 agents remained in the facility. Processing. Discussing. Caldwell pulled out notepad. Started writing. I'm documenting everything while it's fresh. Every technique. Every principle. Every gap he identified. This goes into formal memo tomorrow. Training division needs to see this. Needs to understand what we learned. Needs to authorize continued instruction. Torres spoke quietly. Jim, I've trained with you for 3 years. I've never seen anyone do to you what Bruce just did. Never seen you unable to defend. Never seen you so completely outmatched. He searched for words. That was humbling to watch. And educational. If you, our best instructor, couldn't defend those strikes, that means our entire training program has blind spots. That's a serious problem. Caldwell nodded. It is, but it's a fixable problem. Bruce showed us the gaps. Also showed us how to close them. That's more than most people get. Usually you discover gaps when they kill you. We got to discover them in safe demonstration with patient teacher. That's lucky. Now we have responsibility to fix them, to implement the solutions, to make sure next time someone attacks a protection detail using martial arts techniques, we're ready. We can defend. We can protect the president. The memo Caldwell submitted on May 16, 1972, was classified immediately. Marked classified, protective methods and defensive vulnerabilities not for public disclosure. The memo described the demonstration in detail, listed specific gaps identified in Secret Service defensive protocols, recommended immediate implementation of supplemental training based on Bruce Lee's techniques, requested authorization for Caldwell to study with Lee extensively to develop integrated curriculum. Secret Service Training Division approved the request within a week, authorized Caldwell to work with Bruce, allocated budget for curriculum development, scheduled pilot training program for select agents. If successful, the supplemental training would be rolled out service-wide. Caldwell began training with Bruce twice weekly. 2-hour sessions. Bruce taught. Caldwell learned. They developed lesson plans, training sequences, evaluation criteria, everything needed to teach other agents, everything needed to close the gaps Bruce had identified. The training relationship lasted until July 20th, 1973, the day Bruce died in Hong Kong. Caldwell was devastated. Not just losing teacher, losing friend, losing source of wisdom that had transformed his career. But Caldwell didn't stop training, didn't abandon what Bruce had taught him. He continued practicing, continued teaching other agents, continued developing the curriculum they'd started together, honoring Bruce's contribution by ensuring it lived on, by ensuring it protected presidents, by ensuring Bruce's gift to national security continued even after Bruce was gone. The supplemental training program was implemented fully by 1974. Every Secret Service agent received instruction in the principles Bruce had demonstrated. Low-line defense, redirection technique, compound attack recognition and response. The techniques were integrated so thoroughly that within few years, agents didn't even know they were using Bruce Lee's methods. They were just standard Secret Service protocols, just part of the training everyone received. Caldwell retired from Secret Service in 1994. 37 years of service. Decorated for protective excellence. Commended for training development. He never discussed the Bruce Lee demonstration publicly. It was classified. He'd taken oath. He kept it classified even after Bruce's death, even after the techniques had been integrated into training, even after decades had passed. The oath mattered. The classification mattered. His integrity mattered. But Caldwell never forgot. Never forgot the 5 seconds that changed everything. Never forgot what it felt like to be helpless against 3 strikes. Never forgot the humility of discovering how much he didn't know. never forgot Bruce's generosity in teaching rather than just humiliating. Never forgot the gift of knowledge that had enhanced presidential protection for decades. October 2024. James Caldwell's home in Virginia. He was 90 years old now, retired 30 years. His wife Mary answered the phone. A researcher named Dr. Michael Chun wanted to interview Jim about Bruce Lee, about a demonstration in 1972. Mary called to Jim. He came to the phone. Dr. Chun explained. National Archives had declassified Secret Service file about Bruce Lee consultation. Sarah Martinez, the declassification officer, had provided Caldwell's contact information. Dr. Chun was writing book about Bruce Lee's law enforcement training work. Wanted to interview Caldwell about his experience, about what actually happened that day in May 1972, about what the file didn't capture. Caldwell agreed immediately. I've been waiting 52 years to tell this story publicly. Can you come here? I want to do this properly. Want to give you full account. Want to make sure Bruce's contribution is documented correctly. He changed Secret Service training, changed how we protect presidents, changed my life. His story deserves to be told. Come to Virginia. I'll tell you everything. Dr. Chin arrived 3 days later. Set up recording equipment. Caldwell sat in his living room. 90 years old, but still sharp. Still clear. Still remembering every detail of May 15th, 1972, like it had happened yesterday. I was the best hand-to-hand combat instructor in Secret Service, Caldwell began. Trained by Marines, by FBI, by Secret Service tactical experts. I thought I knew everything about defensive fighting. Thought I was prepared for any threat. Bruce Lee showed me in 5 seconds that I knew nothing, that my training had critical gaps, that I was vulnerable in ways I'd never imagined. 3 strikes. I couldn't defend any of them. Couldn't even see the first one coming. Second one, I blocked perfectly and he used my own defense against me. Third one, I tried to protect my throat and he was just faster. It was devastating, not just physically, mentally, emotionally. 15 years of certainty destroyed in 5 seconds. Caldwell described the demonstration in detail. Every technique, every principle, every gap Bruce had identified, every lesson Bruce had taught in the hours that followed. Dr. Chen listened, recording everything, occasionally asking questions for clarification. The low kick was what shocked me most at first, Caldwell continued. My entire stance was built around protecting the president from torso and head-level threats. Shooters, grabbers, people trying to get to Nixon. Nobody in Secret Service training had ever suggested someone would attack my legs. Why would they? Assassins don't try to kick your shins. They try to shoot the president. But Bruce understood something my trainers didn't. If you take out the bodyguard's foundation, the bodyguard falls. Then the principle is unprotected. It's basic tactics, but we never thought of it because we weren't thinking like martial artists. We were thinking like protection agents defending against anticipated threats. He paused, took a breath, continued. The second strike was more subtle. I blocked it correctly. Perfect Secret Service defensive technique. Strong, fast, positioned exactly right. But Bruce didn't fight my block. He yielded to it. Used my own force to move my guard out of position. That's when I understood. My training assumed attackers would commit to their strikes, would try to power through defenses. Bruce showed me what happens when an attacker doesn't commit, when they adapt, when they use your defense as part of their offense. We had no counter for that, no training for that scenario. That gap could be fatal. Caldwell's voice grew quieter, more reflective. But the third strike was what really taught me the profound lesson. Bruce's hand at my throat stopped 1 inch from killing strike. Perfect control, perfect precision. He could have crushed my windpipe, could have ended the demonstration with me on the ground, unable to breathe. Instead, he stopped. Show me the opening. Prove the point without hurting me. That's mastery, not just physical skill. The discipline to pull a strike at full speed. The control to stop precisely where you intend. The wisdom to teach rather than destroy. That combination of skill and character, that's what made Bruce extraordinary. Lots of people can hit hard. Very few can hit that precisely and choose not to complete the strike. Dr. Chun asked about the training that followed. about the curriculum development, about implementing Bruce's techniques into Secret Service protocols. Caldwell's face brightened. This was his proudest achievement, the work he'd done to honor Bruce's gift. Bruce and I worked together for 14 months, from May 1972 until his death in July 1973. We met twice a week when he was in Los Angeles. 2-hour sessions. He taught me everything, not just techniques, principles, philosophy, the thinking behind the movements. He wanted me to understand deeply so I could teach others effectively. Couldn't just memorize forms. Had to internalize concepts. That's how Bruce taught, always explaining the why, not just the what. Caldwell pulled out old notebook, worn leather cover, pages filled with notes in neat handwriting, diagrams, technical descriptions, training sequences. I documented everything, every session, every technique, every principle he explained. This notebook became foundation for the curriculum we developed, the supplemental training program that every Secret Service agent received starting in 1974. Bruce's techniques are still in Secret Service training today, modified, updated, integrated with other methods. But the core principles, defending low-line attacks, managing redirected force, recognizing and countering compound attack sequences, those came from Bruce. Those are his contribution to presidential protection that has lasted 50 years. Dr. Chun asked the critical question, in your professional judgment, did Bruce Lee's training make Secret Service agents more effective at protecting the president? Caldwell didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Unquestionably. Bruce identified gaps in our defensive capabilities that we didn't know existed, gave us tools to close those gaps, enhanced our readiness for scenarios we hadn't trained for. Did it save the president's life? I can't point to a specific incident where Bruce's techniques prevented assassination, but I can tell you with certainty, we were better prepared after Bruce's training than before it. We could defend against wider range of threats. We had deeper understanding of combat principles. We were more adaptable, more aware of our vulnerabilities, more capable of responding to unanticipated attacks. That absolutely made us more effective at our core mission, protecting the president. Bruce's contribution to that mission was significant and lasting. Caldwell's expression grew somber. When Bruce died in July 1973, I was devastated. We'd been working together for over a year. He'd become friend, not just teacher. I learned so much from him, not just martial arts, wisdom about life, about discipline, about continuous improvement, about humility in face of knowledge you don't have. Bruce was 32 years old when he died, just beginning his international fame, just beginning to show the world what he could do. His death was tragedy on so many levels. Personal tragedy for his family, cultural tragedy for Asian representation in film, martial arts tragedy for what he could have continued to develop and teach. And for me, personally, loss of teacher who transformed my understanding of my profession. But Caldwell's voice strengthened. But I didn't let his death end what he'd started. I continued practicing, continued teaching other agents, continued developing the curriculum we'd begun together. That was how I honored him, by ensuring his contribution lived on, by ensuring his techniques protected presidents even after he was gone, by passing his wisdom to next generation of agents. Bruce gave me gift of knowledge. I gave him gift of legacy. His methods are still protecting presidents today. That's immortality. That's impact that transcends individual life. Dr. Chun asked about the classification, why the demonstration had been kept secret for 52 years, why Caldwell had never told this story publicly even after Bruce became international icon. Caldwell's answer was simple. Oath. I took oath when I joined Secret Service. To protect classified information. To safeguard protective methods. To prioritize national security over personal interest. That demonstration was classified because it revealed vulnerabilities in presidential protection. Revealed specific gaps that could be exploited. You don't share that publicly. Ever. Even after gaps are closed. Even after techniques are updated. Even after decades pass. You keep your oath. That mattered to me. My integrity mattered. My commitment to Secret Service mattered. So I stayed silent. Even when Bruce became famous. Even when people wrote books and made documentaries about him. Even when I could have shared stories that would have contributed to his legend. I kept my oath. That's what honor requires. Caldwell paused, then smiled slightly. But now the file is declassified. Official decision by National Archives that public interest outweighs security concerns. The protective methods from 1972 are obsolete. Secret Service has updated training dozens of times. The specific gaps Bruce identified have been closed for 50 years. So now I can speak. Now I can tell the story. Now I can give Bruce the public recognition for his contribution to presidential protection that he deserved but never received during his life. That's why I'm talking to you. Why I'm sharing this. Why I want this documented properly. Bruce Lee enhanced Secret Service training, made agents more capable, potentially saved presidential lives through techniques he taught. That's historical fact. That deserves to be known. Dr. Chen asked final question. What's the most important lesson Bruce Lee taught you? The one thing you want people to understand about him and about that demonstration. Caldwell thought for a long moment, then answered carefully. The lesson is this. Expertise is never complete. Mastery is never finished. No matter how well-trained you are, how much experience you have, how expert you become, there's always more to learn. Always deeper understanding to pursue. Always gaps in your knowledge that you haven't discovered yet. I was Secret Service's top hand-to-hand combat instructor, trained by the best, experienced in protecting presidents in war zones. And Bruce showed me in 5 seconds that I had critical gaps in my defensive capabilities. Not because I've been poorly trained, because my trainers couldn't prepare me for everything. Because no training program, no matter how comprehensive, can cover every possible scenario. He continued, Bruce didn't humiliate me for having those gaps. He taught me how to close them. That's what great teachers do. They don't exploit your ignorance to prove their superiority. They illuminate your ignorance to help you grow. Bruce could have made me look foolish. Could have publicized the demonstration to show that Secret Service agents were poorly prepared. Could have used it for marketing, for building his reputation, for proving he was better than elite government agents. He did none of those things. He taught us, helped us improve, enhanced our capabilities, asked for no payment, sought no publicity, just contributed his expertise to national security because he believed it was right thing to do. That's character. That's integrity. That's what I want people to understand about Bruce Lee. He wasn't just skilled martial artist. He was a person of profound character who used his skills to help others, to teach, to serve. That's his real legacy. The interview lasted 3 hours. Dr. Chen recorded every word, every detail, every reflection from 90-year-old man who'd carried this story for 52 years and was finally, gratefully, sharing it with the world. After Dr. Chen left, Caldwell sat in his living room holding the worn notebook, the one with all his notes from training sessions with Bruce. He paged through it slowly, remembering. Each diagram brought back specific session, specific technique, specific moment of understanding when Bruce had explained principle that transformed Caldwell's approach. Mary, his wife, sat down next to him. You okay, Jim? That was emotional for you. Caldwell nodded. I'm good. Just remembering. 52 years ago, Bruce Lee showed me I didn't know how to fight. Then spent 14 months teaching me how to actually fight. Changed my career. Changed my life. I wanted to tell that story for half a century. Finally got to. Feels good. Feels right. Feels like I finally gave Bruce the recognition he deserved. Mary smiled. He'd be proud of you. Proud of how you honored what he taught you. Proud of how you passed it forward. Proud that his techniques are still protecting presidents 50 years later. That's legacy. That's impact. Caldwell closed the notebook, set it carefully on the table. He was 32 years old. So young. So much more he could have accomplished. But what he did accomplish, what he gave us in that short time, that mattered. That changed things. That saved lives. You don't need long life to have profound impact. You need wisdom and generosity. Bruce had both. The world lost someone extraordinary when he died. But his contribution lives on. In Secret Service training. In martial arts worldwide. In everyone he taught. including me, especially me. 6 months later, Dr. Chin's book was published. The Dragon's Service, Bruce Lee and the Secret History of His Law Enforcement Training Work. Caldwell's interview was featured prominently. The declassified Secret Service file was reproduced in full. The story of the May 15, 1972 demonstration was told in detail. Martial arts community, law enforcement community, Bruce Lee fans worldwide. Everyone read it. Everyone learned about Bruce's contribution to presidential protection. Everyone understood that Bruce Lee wasn't just movie star or martial arts legend. He was a person who'd served his country by enhancing the capabilities of those who protected the president. The book became bestseller, not because of sensationalism, because of revelation, because people learned something about Bruce Lee they hadn't known, something that added dimension to his legacy, something that showed the depth of his character and the breadth of his impact. Secret Service released official statement. We can confirm that Bruce Lee consulted with Secret Service in 1972 on hand-to-hand combat techniques for close-quarters protection scenarios. His contributions were significant and were integrated into our training protocols. We honor his service to presidential protection and recognize his lasting impact on Secret Service defensive capabilities. The techniques he introduced enhanced agent safety and effectiveness. We're grateful for his expertise and his willingness to share it in service to national security. That statement, from an institution that rarely acknowledged specific training methods or historical consultants, was remarkable, was recognition of Bruce's contribution at highest level, was validation of everything Caldwell had said, was proof that the 5-second demonstration in May 1972 had changed more than one agent's understanding, had changed institutional approach, had enhanced presidential protection for generations. Shannon Lee, Bruce's daughter, released statement through Bruce Lee Foundation. My father believed martial arts should serve humanity, should make the world safer and better. His consultation with Secret Service exemplified that belief. He saw opportunity to enhance presidential protection, and he contributed his expertise without seeking recognition or compensation. That's who he was. Not just martial artist pursuing fame. Teacher and servant leader using his knowledge to help others. This newly revealed chapter of his life makes me proud. Makes me understand even more deeply the character of the man I knew too briefly. Thank you to Agent Caldwell for preserving this story, for honoring my father's contribution, for ensuring his service to this country is finally recognized. James Caldwell died in March 2025 at age 91. His obituary in the Washington Post mentioned his 37-year Secret Service career, mentioned his role in protecting Presidents Johnson and Nixon, mentioned his contributions to training development, and mentioned, in final paragraph, his relationship with Bruce Lee. Caldwell was trained by Bruce Lee in 1972 to 1973 and integrated Lee's martial arts techniques in a Secret Service defensive tactics protocols. Caldwell credited Lee with transforming his understanding of combat and with making significant contributions to presidential protection capabilities. Caldwell's implementation of Lee's training methods influenced Secret Service protocols for decades. At Caldwell's funeral, 3 former Secret Service agents spoke. All had been trained by Caldwell in the 1970s and 80s. All had learned techniques that originated with Bruce Lee, though they hadn't known the source at the time. They spoke about Caldwell's dedication to continuous improvement, his insistence that agents never stop learning, his emphasis on humility and recognizing gaps in knowledge, his teaching that expertise required constant questioning and development. All principles Caldwell had learned from Bruce. All principles he'd passed forward through decades of training Secret Service agents. One agent said, "Jim taught us that the most dangerous thing in protective work is thinking you know everything. That certainty makes you vulnerable. That true expertise requires humility about what you don't know." He lived that principle. Learned it from Bruce Lee when Bruce showed him gaps in his training. Spent the rest of his career teaching it to us. That wisdom, that approach to learning and growth, that's Jim's legacy to Secret Service. And through Jim, It's Bruce Lee's legacy too. The classified file that Sarah Martinez declassified in 2024 is now available to researchers at National Archives. Case File 72, SS 1547. Protective Services Training, Supplemental Methods, 1972. Anyone can read it. Can see the memo describing Bruce Lee's demonstration. Can see Agent Caldwell's detailed report. Can see the recommendations. Can see the authorization for continued training. Can see the follow-up documentation showing implementation of Bruce's techniques in his Secret Service protocols. Can see 52-year journey from classified secret to public history. The file includes photographs taken during demonstration. Bruce and Caldwell. Bruce demonstrating stance. Bruce showing technique. Caldwell practicing. Other agents watching. The photographs aren't dramatic, just documentation of training session. But knowing the context, knowing what happened in those 5 seconds, the photographs become remarkable. Become evidence of the moment when elite protection agent learned he had critical gaps in his training. Moment when martial arts legend taught rather than humiliated. Moment when genuine mastery met institutional expertise and elevated it. In 2024, Secret Service Training Academy in Beltsville, Maryland dedicated training room to James Caldwell's memory. Plaque on wall reads, Caldwell Training Room. In honor of Agent James Caldwell, 1934 to 2025. Master Instructor, dedicated to continuous improvement and humble pursuit of knowledge. In recognition of his service and his integration of supplemental defensive techniques in his Secret Service protocols, enhancing presidential protection capabilities for generations. Expertise is never complete. Mastery is never finished. Agent Caldwell. Below that plaque, Secret Service added second one. The defensive techniques developed in this room were influenced by martial arts instruction provided by Bruce Lee in 1972 to 1973. Agent Caldwell trained with Lee and adapted his methods for presidential protection scenarios. Lee's contribution to Secret Service capabilities is gratefully acknowledged. 2 plaques. 2 legacies. Connected by 5 seconds in May 1972 when Secret Service's best hand-to-hand combat instructor couldn't defend 3 strikes. When pride met humility. When expertise met mastery. When institutional training met individual genius. When James Caldwell learned he didn't know how to fight. And when Bruce Lee taught him. That's the story. The classified file. The 5-second demonstration. The 14 months of training. The 50-year impact. The recognition finally given. The contribution finally acknowledged. The service finally honored. Bruce Lee enhanced Secret Service training. Made agents more capable. Potentially saved presidents' lives. Did it without seeking recognition. Without publicity. Without compensation. Just contribution to national security from martial artist who believed his skills should serve humanity. James Caldwell learned the lesson. Passed it forward. Honored Bruce's contribution by implementing it, by teaching it, by ensuring it lived on. Kept the secret for 52 years because oath mattered. Then told the story when declassification allowed. Ensuring Bruce received the recognition he'd earned but never sought. 3 strikes. 5 seconds. Gaps exposed. Training transformed. Presidents protected. Lives potentially saved. Legacy established. Service honored. That's what was in the classified file. That's what the 5 seconds meant. That's why it mattered. That's why the story needed to be told. A Secret Service file marked classified mentioned Bruce Lee. Now you know why. Now the world knows. Now Bruce's contribution to presidential protection is part of historical record. Part of his legacy. Part of understanding who he was beyond the films and the legend. Teacher. Servant. Patriot. Person who used his mastery to serve rather than to dominate. To help rather than to humiliate. To contribute to something larger than himself. The file is declassified. The story is told. The service is honored. The legacy lives on. In Secret Service training. In protective protocols. In agents who defend presidents using techniques Bruce Lee introduced 50 years ago. In the recognition that expertise is never complete and mastery is never finished, and the greatest strength is knowing what you don't know and being willing to learn from those who can teach you. That's Bruce Lee's gift to presidential protection. That's James Caldwell's gift to history by finally telling the story. That's what 5 seconds in May 1972 meant, and continue to mean, decades later, generations later, forever.